Welcome to the Voice of the Beginning, the Word of the Bible. Before we begin, help us spread the word. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share with those you love.
The book of Exodus begins with the incredible growth of a nation. Jacob's family, which arrived in Egypt with just 70 people, multiplied extraordinarily, becoming a great multitude. However, this prosperity of God's people sparked fear in the heart of Pharaoh, a ruler who did not know Joseph and the story of his salvation. As a result, he imposed harsh slavery on the Israelites, overwhelming them with forced labor. Spiritually, this chapter teaches us a powerful lesson. The prosperity that comes from faith can generate a negative reaction in the world. When God's presence causes us to grow and prosper, the darkness around us can react and oppose us. The opposition from Egypt was not a sign of failure, but a sign that God's people were on the right path, fulfilling the divine promise of multiplication. Oppression, therefore, is not the end of the story. It is often the prelude to an even greater miracle, evidence that deliverance is on the way. In the midst of all the cruelty and oppression, God raised up a deliverer for his people. Moses, a baby who was condemned to death, was miraculously saved in a basket in the Nile River and surprisingly raised in Pharaoh's own house. He grew up with the identity of an Egyptian, but an act of justice led him to flee to the desert, where he became a shepherd. This chapter teaches us that God prepares his leaders in unexpected and unusual ways. Our journey is not always a straight line. We may go through environments of oppression and even be trained in places that seem distant from our purpose. However, the desert is a school of God. The time Moses spent shepherding sheep was the time God used to mold him, teaching him the humility and dependence necessary to shepherd an entire nation. Moses' life shows us that every twist and apparent detour in our history is, in fact, part of God's perfect plan. Moses, in his desert routine, has an encounter that will change his life forever: the burning bush. A fire that burns but does not consume, symbolizing God's presence that transforms but does not destroy. There, God reveals himself to him, calling him by name and revealing his identity. I am who I am. It's a supernatural encounter in the midst of ordinary life, showing that God can speak to us in our routine and in our deserts. He meets us exactly where we are and reveals his nature to us. Moses' response, asking, "Who am I?" is the natural reaction to the greatness of God. However, the divine answer, "I will be with you," is what truly matters. Our empowerment does not come from our abilities or merits, but from God's presence and power. Moses' story teaches us that the focus is not on who we are, but on who he is. Moses, even after being commissioned, still struggled with his own insecurities and doubts, questioning his ability and the credibility of his mission. With infinite patience, God gave him clear signs of his power to strengthen his faith. He turned Moses' staff into a snake, healed his hand from leprosy, and turned water into blood, proving that his authority and power were with Moses. And finally, God provided Aaron, his brother, as a spokesperson to help him on the mission, showing that he would not be alone. This chapter speaks directly to the universal struggle between faith and doubt. God knows that we will have fears and insecurities, but he does not give up on us. Instead, he gives us evidence of his power and surrounds us with necessary support. Aaron's support reminds us that God not only empowers us, but also uses other people to help us on our journey. His provision is much greater than our insecurity. Moses and Aaron, obeying God's command, presented themselves to Pharaoh with the direct message, "Let my people go." The ruler's reaction was one of contempt and arrogance. He not only refused the request, but also increased the workload on the Israelites, demanding that they make bricks without straw. the life of God's people, already difficult, became even more unbearable. This episode teaches us a crucial lesson. The first step of obedience does not always result in an immediate victory. Faith is not a guarantee that things will become easy. On the contrary, the first step of faith can often intensify the battle and opposition. However, Pharaoh's resistance was not the end of the story. In fact, it was the preparation for an even greater manifestation of God's power. The enemy's opposition is a clear sign that something powerful is about to happen. The difficulty is not the denial of the promise, but the evidence that deliverance is on the way. After the first frustrating attempt with Pharaoh, the people of Israel lost hope. It is in this moment of despair that God reveals himself again to Moses. He presents himself not just as I am, but as Jehovah, the God of the covenant, who will now fulfill his promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The hardness of Pharaoh's heart and the suffering of the people did not take God by surprise. In fact, they created the perfect setting for his glory. Spiritually, this chapter teaches us that God does not remain silent in the face of our disappointment. He reaffirms his promises in moments of greatest doubt. The revelation of the name Jehovah, YHWH, is the certainty that his faithfulness is eternal. He is the God who moves to fulfill what he has promised, even when our faith seems weak. This divine revelation is a reminder that God's plans are not derailed by human stubbornness or suffering. Instead, these challenges become the very instruments through which his power is magnified. The name Jehovah signifies a God who is actively involved in history, a God who intervenes to honor his word. The Israelites were at their lowest point, yet God chose this moment to show them that his character is defined by fidelity and action. He doesn't just exist, he is a God who moves on behalf of his people. This is a profound spiritual lesson. Our greatest moments of struggle are often when God chooses to reveal his most profound truths to us.
May this word take root in your spirit and guide your steps. If this message spoke to you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.